Yoder Toter podcast. This time, this is the third one of the day. I got Jason Miller with me here today, former Amish.
That's right.
When did you leave the Amish?
Well, I left the Amish officially, and wow, you should have told me to figure this out first. 2002, something like that.
Oh, so you've been out for a while.
I've been out. I'm 44. When I was 21, I left the Amish. You get your age at 21, and so you can do the math.
A little bit.
Okay.
Notice that camera there. There
we are. Put us in focus there a little better. Sound good.
Alrighty. So you've been out 2001.
Yeah. So real quick, if we figure it up, I'm 44. 22 years ago, I left the Amish. So in 2002. Okay. So 2002, I got my age at 21. 2002, and I left almost immediately.
Okay.
Yeah, I was trying to date a girl that, went a different direction with a different man, and I was out.
Now, how old was you at that time?
21.
21.
I was 21, yeah, because that's when we got our age. I was still, actually, I wasn't living at home. I was supposed to be. I was always kind of this rebel, right? I didn't get baptized till I was 18. But whenever I got my age at 21, I was able to keep my own money. I didn't last long, man. I was within a few months, actually, of turning 21. I took a scissors. I cut my own hair off.
You cut your own hair off?
I cut my own hair.
Man.
Yeah, I was going to, with my brother. I met my brother in Cody, Wyoming for a big rodeo out there. And I had the haircut. I didn't know how to get to no barber. I'd never been to no barber. Never forget it. One night, in the little cabin I lived in, I just chopped, man. Just trying to get the afro down so I could put the cowboy hat without it flying back off.
Are you saying you had an Amish afro?
Big time, man. This hair would stand straight up. In fact, I always make the joke that I was half traumatized by my long hair because we had the bowl cuts, We couldn't do the shingling of the hair, and so I was always paranoid about my bad hair. And so for years, this is as long as I can go without being triggered. So.
Okay. So you were, since you were 21 then, you were probably baptized already and member into the Amish church?
I was, yeah. Yeah, most of them get baptized at 16. I don't know, is that what happened?
Well, we were 17 on 18.
17 on 18. Well, probably between 16 and 18, 15 and 18 where I grew up. We grew up in a New Order church in Salem, Indiana. So I didn't grow up in a huge, massive Amish community maybe like you did, but whenever I was trying to become baptized at 16 years old, I did not have a good relationship with my dad.
Yeah.
And so they would counsel me and they would tell me I should wait till the next class.
Yeah.
So I tried 3 different times to join the church and kind of got kicked out or essentially asked to go to the next group. So I was 18 or 19 before I was baptized. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I dropped out just before. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Never did the baptism.
No, well, I disqualified because I rode a bicycle.
Oh, because you rode a bicycle. That's really okay.
Yeah.
Well, for me, I was in love with this girl, so I had to get baptized. It was all about the girl, man. That's what
so you were doing it for that motive.
I was, I hope her dad doesn't see that because because I really thought that I was doing it for the right reason, obviously, but looking back, I would have probably tried to leave the church earlier were it not for the girl. Yeah. I mean, I really wanted their approval. You're in a small community, you want people's approval, you want them to you want to be liked, man. That's the whole, that's the whole foundation of it. Yeah, so whenever I, when that didn't work out, I asked him, I want to say, maybe I was 20. It might have been a year after I asked out. So it could have been within a year. I asked her out. She said no, went with another guy. Another guy asked her out the same week I did.
Oh, really?
And funny story, but within a year, I left the Amish. And, was excommunicated about 8 to 10 months later. I left with all good intentions. I really did. I wanted to find truth. I was always a truth seeker. In fact, I would have Bible studies with youth, and we just wanted to find the truth. I always knew there was something wrong with what they believed. It didn't add the way I read the Bible, and the way that we were kind of forced to believe did not make sense. So I would read the Bible with other people, and I remember one of the ministers came to me one time and he said, "Hey Jason, I heard you're having a Bible study. That's great, yeah. We'd really like to have Fred Yoder over there with you while you're doing it. That way he can, make sure you guys stay on track." And so when I recognized the massive amount of control that was behind it, I always kind of knew it. And then I started to get kind of, I would say almost aggressive with the families and the people. My best friend's mom at one point was very kind of thought I was a bad example and was leading her sons off to some weird direction because I was always a truth seeker. And so So that's when I left the Amish. I went to Holderman Mennonites. I went to other Mennonites. I went to some Southern Baptists where they had, the Southern Baptist church I went to had, they had a bunker full of like AR-15s and ammunition. Yeah, they were like the radical people.
Wow.
So I went to all kinds of different churches, but I found out that most of them have the same overarching religious structure, where it's a few people at the top that believe they have a monopoly on truth, and then everybody else falls down below that, and they don't trust you to hear God yourself. Yeah. And so I kind of saw the patterns, and as an Amish kid that was always kind of on the wild side anyway, within a year I was down a really bad path. And so by the time I was 22, I quit going to church. I kind of said I'll come back to God later. I started drinking, met some friends, right, and I was on. That's kind of where my story, really starts. I didn't want to go that way. I want to mention this. That my dad, even though I didn't have a good relationship with him, he did instill a lot of good things in me. So I say now, I told somebody this the other day, that all the spankings I got didn't really pay off till I was 30.
Okay.
But believe me, they paid off. I'm grateful for every time I was, my dad spanked me or tried to, in some way, put the reins on me.
Right.
So
right. You appreciated that.
Yeah, I appreciate that now. But Dad did instill something in me that really has made an impact in my life and is impactful now. Right now, I can look back and see some of the morals that I have and some of the work ethics and some of the ways that I, see life comes from what my dad taught. So It's not a loss. If you have kids and maybe they're going off in different directions, don't think they're leaving because you're being too hard on them, because maybe they just can't handle it then, but maybe it will pay off later. And that's the way I see what my dad did for me.
Yeah.
So Dad did a lot of good things, but within a year of leaving the Amish, I was off on a really bad path, man.
Yeah. Well, I think most of us that leave the Amish kind of go, it's almost like too much freedom, too quick, too fast. I know for me it was, and I've made a lot of stupid mistakes, but I learned from those mistakes as well. And I know a lot of former Amish that landed in jail. Yeah. I even went to jail.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean,
praise God, I never went to jail. I should have gone to jail.
So you really, what I just heard so far from you is, like, you were seeking truth, and it sounds like you tested the waters really deep by going to all these different churches and denominations. You mentioned Mennonite, Baptist, all of that. So you were really desperate.
I went to big churches too, Church of Christ, all the mega churches. And, attended one mega church in New Albany, Indiana fairly regularly for a while. Great people, but the culture, right? I was starved for, community. That was instilled in me from what I was taught. So, that also had the same general structure, not driving you to a personal relationship with God, where God speaks to you, and it's, the mediator to God is Jesus, and that is between me and Jesus and God and the Holy Spirit, which empowers me to walk out what God's calling me to. That was never taught. I didn't understand that. So when I got off the path and I got way out here in left field, man, I found myself, like a ship on the sea without a rudder, man. And the waves hit and I got swept out to sea, man. So.
Right. Now, if you'd have been taught that, then you'd have been equipped to know what you're dealing with. But you're kind of just being battered here and there. Yeah,
I really was not equipped to deal with anything other than the little sheltered community that I was in. Of course, we lived in a community about 18 to 22 families. I was there till I was 21. I was born in Michigan, but we moved to Indiana, moved to Michigan, moved back to Indiana. Dad always moved around a little bit, but most of my life was right there in Salem, Indiana. Small community, 18 to 22 families. And so we didn't know, for a little later in my story, addiction, which I got into a lot of addiction. I didn't even know what that was. I had no idea that you could get addicted to something. I didn't understand. I was totally naive. So that was a big, slap in the face whenever I finally hit the real world. I call it my boots hitting the pavement, man. It got real.
Right.
And I wasn't ready for it by any means, man. So, but I'm grateful, the stories, that's what builds us, man.
Yeah.
If you're going through a hard time, it's building you, man. You ain't gonna quit, you're not gonna give up. It's gonna build something in you, man. That's
Amen. Yeah. So you were not saved in the Amish then?
Well, I was. Okay. Actually, yes. So I did. So my, my story's a little different maybe than a lot of people's, because I was under so much condemnation. This is how we were taught. I'm sure you get that.
Right.
But at 16 years old, the bishop's kid, we were friends. He was a little younger than I was. He always would pressure me to get saved or to not do this or not say that. I was always a little bit of a loose cannon. I would say things like, like people would go, "Whoa, Jason, you shouldn't say that," right? So he always wanted. He was a great guy. I hate to, but he wanted me as like a notch in his belt. That's what I always felt. One night I was over there for the night, and he almost strong-armed me to get down on my knees and say the prayer and accept Jesus. And I believe God honored that. Yeah. But the problem with religion and getting saved, and it says, John 3:16 says, if you'll believe. No, I can't think of it.
3:16 is God so loved the world.
God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believeth on him would not perish but have everlasting life. Well, in religion, that verse is so overplayed, and I did not have the revelation of what that was supposed to do for me. So when I got saved, all it brought is condemnation. Oh, gosh. So it brought tons of condemnation. So I just felt condemned. I believe my soul was saved, yes. But I did not go into the normal where I felt freedom and joy, and unfortunately that came later.
Gotcha. But that's interesting though, because you knew the truth. I didn't know the truth at all before I left. So you actually understood salvation when you were still in there.
I did understand. It's a great question, Levi, because I understood the basics of it. I knew I had to come back to it. Right. So when I was out there running wild for 10 years, I knew I had to come back to it, but I didn't understand grace. That's what I didn't understand. So you need a revelation of the grace of God and the new covenant and what Jesus did, so you're not under condemnation. You should be under conviction and and motivated to do better, but not condemned to do better, because that only takes you. Nobody was ever beaten into behaving, and if they did, it was out of fear. Which as soon as the guy who beats you is out of sight, you're going to go back to your habits. It's behavior modification. Yes. And I learned that from when I left the Amish at 21 to when my accident happened at 31. I learned all about behavior modification. I would go off the path and I would try to come back. I was trying to correct. And, but it was behavior modification, and I could never get it right. It just was painful. My life has been, until 7 years ago, my life was just constantly up and down and just exhausting myself trying to find the truth.
So what happened 7 years ago?
Well,
to change all that.
Yeah. So I'm going to try to condense my story here, because my story, first of all, is all over YouTube. There's a podcast called Everyday Miracles Podcast that my full, complete testimony is on. Julie, I'm also in a book called Everyday Miracles. It's coming out. It's being put out by, I have to think of the ministries that's putting it out. I'll bring it up. But there's a great story. And on my YouTube channel, Jason D. Miller, I also have a condensed version. But I'm going to try to keep my story, the basics. So let's go back to 2012. Okay. So 10 years, I left the Amish about from 2002 to 2012. And my life was just up and down, back and forth, full of condemnation, guilt, partying, had a lot of fun, right? I became fairly successful. I had a good job. I owned a house, a big house in a subdivision. I had a bass boat, a ski boat. I had 3 motorcycles at one point in time. I was dating the hottest girl in town, right? Everything I thought I wanted. And outside, my life would have looked good. And when the money's coming in and you're a functioning addict, everything looks good. But when the waves hit, it's going to test you. And waves are always going to hit in your life. And when the wave hit for me was March 2nd of 2012. So that's 12 years ago now. But I was living in Indiana. I just lost my home to a short sale because my addiction was getting really bad. My main girlfriend, I just broke up with her, was dating another girl, moved into a house with her on her dad's property March 2nd of 2012. I was in this double wide home and a tornado hit me. So this is my tornado story, is really where a lot of my story happened. Yeah. There's a lot to my tornado story. I encourage you to find my testimony on some other places on YouTube. But my tornado story, March 2nd of 2012, a massive F4 tornado hit a double wide that I was living in. I ran next door. My buddy Joe, Mariah, and their 3 kids were in the trailer. And they were on the same property, but they were next door. You're thinking trailer, tornado, got to get them out. I ran outside, looked, saw the tornado coming right over the hill, coming straight at us. I describe it as a freight train coming sideways because there was a sawmill there. It had hit the sawmill, actually a kiln kiln yard, and all this lumber was in the air, and it's coming straight towards you, man. I mean, I still this day get goosebumps just thinking about this massive wall. I'm just like, you're dead. Like, it's just, it was not like, there's a storm, I gotta run. I heard people screaming. I ran next door. My buddy, they were outside. Joe and Mariah were each holding a child, and the oldest daughter, she was 3 years old. She was inside, standing in the doorway, and they're looking at the tornado, and Mariah is screaming. She had been waiting on her dad to come pick her up, but she is screaming bloody murder. You could see this thing's gonna hit us, like panicking. I grabbed Angel. I said, we're going to my house. Go to my house. So I ran back I got him. We ran over to my house, just, right next door. I lived in a double wide. And I always tell this story. It's important to understand. Double wides are usually strapped down. I don't know if you understand. The metal straps that are in the roof of a double wide. They get put in, then there's augers in the ground, and they strap them down. Trailers and double wides. That way the wind can't blow them away.
Gotcha.
It's sitting on a foundation, but they're strapped down. Well, this double wide, I'd been under it the day before, and I remember clearly seeing it wasn't strapped down. So this double wide had not been fastened to the augers. It was only sitting on top of the foundation. When the tornado hit, I brought him into the house, put him in the middle of the floor, threw some pillows on top of him. At one point I went to the door to see where the tornado was at, and it was ripping my garage off. It came right on top of it. So I slammed the door, ran back on top of everybody, jumped on top of them, and the tornado, hit my house squarely. It just grabbed my house just like a giant shaking a kid. It was like bam, and you could feel the house just like pop up off the foundation. And the whole double wide literally got sucked up. And I remember the floor of this house just going up like this, and I'm like, you feel like, Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz, right? You're just getting sucked up. And I heard a loud explosion. I thought the windows broke, and I remember thinking I'm going to feel debris hit me. Nothing happened, and we kept going up, and then I blacked out. And what happens is a tornado comes, and the eye of the tornado is in the middle, and it came so squarely over my house, I believe it sucked the oxygen out of the air, picked us up, blew the windows out, sucked the oxygen out, and we all blacked out.
Wow.
Pulled the oxygen right out of the air. So praise God for that, because what happens when I woke up, I was 300 feet in the air, spinning around in circles, laying on the inside wall of this tornado, literally spinning around in here. Looked down, could see the green grass way down below me, and I knew where I was at, and I just thought, how am I going to get down? All this debris up there, and a tornado, the rotation creates like a blender effect. The center, it picks you up, you're in the center, and it throws you out the sidewalls. Well, I, by the grace of God, was held on the inside wall of that tornado. I got picked up, sucked all the way up, and then blacked out, woke up in a field, maybe I say a quarter mile away, something like that.
Quarter mile away?
I was way out there in a field, yep. Had amnesia for a while. There's a lot to this story where I came back, the police officer found me, I blacked out, went to the hospital, had massive broken bones. So obviously what happens, I got pulled up into the funnel cloud and then thrown out of the top of the tornado and thrown back away. The tornado was going this way, and I landed like over there, quite a ways out in the field.
Right.
So I went to the hospital. I had 14 broken bones. I landed on this arm. It blew up, this arm shattered. I still have 22 screws in this left arm. It almost severed this arm. I was cut right through my armpit. This arm was shattered. My collarbone, my shoulder blade broke. My back in 3 places, and 5 ribs. 5 ribs in my back in 3 places, something like that.
Right.
And
you're pretty messed up.
I was messed up, really messed up. And it was 3 days later before I found out that the family had all been killed.
Oh, so everybody in the house?
Yeah, everybody else was killed except me. The little girl, 3-year-old Angel was alive, but they took her off life support 3 days later, and that's how I found out. On the news, I heard them say, hey, we're taking Angel off life support. Jason, we're sorry. And I didn't know. So I'm laying in a hospital bed. The news anchor told me that they took Angel off life support.
Wow.
So that was the news report. That's how, and then everybody in the room started scrambling. They had been lying to me about, or I had avoided the question.
Yeah.
I didn't know they had gotten killed. So yeah, again, there's so much to that tornado story. I was hurt so bad, went into really dark times, got addicted to my pain meds, went into deep depression, had PTSD, had something called survivor's guilt. And for some of you, you've heard that term, but you don't know what it is. Survivor's guilt is actually a real thing. It is something that your body is like a trauma response, and it causes kind of like PTSD symptoms. But it's where you are guilty for being alive. And that's like, we all know about carrying guilt and condemnation, and we feel so guilty. Well, survivor's guilt, and if you don't identify it, you don't know what's wrong with you. You are not able to function right. And I was in a counseling session with some guys, and we're 4 hours in, and my life is so dark and suicidal if possible. I never was officially suicidal because I think God protected me from that spirit. I do think suicide is a spirit. But in a session, I remember this, I was laying under a table at 3 in the morning, and this guy is kneeling down in front of me trying to talk to me, and I'm sobbing, and this is about 8 months after the tornado, and he said, "Jason, you're guilty that you're alive, aren't you?" And it just like broke something in me, Rand. And when he said that, and I recognized that survivor's guilt had that grip on me. And anyway, they prayed over me, something was released off of me, but the reason I tell that story is because this is how real emotional trauma is. When I woke up the next morning, I woke up on a bed of white sheets, like this tablecloth. And I woke up and the bed sheet was pink. It changed colors. I was like, what? I thought I was bleeding or something. So I got up and I was like, what is wrong? And I don't claim to know what it was except an outward manifestation of an inward change, but I bled pink for 7 days. A lot of my therapy was I would go from the hot tub to the pool, and I would swim laps trying to rehab this arm. And I would take white towels, and I could the towel would turn pink.
Oh, wow.
Really incredible. And, I believe it was just a sign of how real and powerful that my body, whatever it was releasing from this guilt that I carried, I did not want to be alive. People would say things like, "You're so thankful. It's so great that you're alive. Wow. God's really got a plan for you." And you have to be careful when people are going through hard times because they don't always want to hear the brightest, cheeriest thing. It's not always the smartest thing to say. I know people cared, I understand, but they just didn't know what to do with me and how to handle me. And this is where a lot of my lack of foundation or loose living for 10 years really started to come back into effect, and I started to fall apart. So the story kind of switches again, right? We went 10 years, had the tornado, went for the first, went 2 or 3 years that I went into full-blown addiction. And that's again, like, my testimony is about 2012 to 2016, really December of 2016 to where I finally got sober. So if you look at that March, April, 2012, 13, 14, 15, 16, about 4.5 years. That was from March of 2012 to December 21st of 2016. My life was an absolute nightmare. I mean, I could make a movie about, the things. And a lot of you guys, I'm sure, that are watching know someone that was in addiction. But the horrors that happen there, man, if you don't let them make you better, they're going to make you bitter. And if you don't let them build you up and cause it to, the iron sharpens iron idea that, these hard things are going to build you into something, it's going to destroy you and take you out. And it's dark times in there, man. Some real dark times, Levi.
I love what you said there. If you don't, you get bitter. If it doesn't make it better, it'll make it bitter. Yeah, it's so true. Because there's so many things that the enemy tried to use to destroy us, but God's hand was all over you, even back then. Even when I didn't know him, his hand was on me. His grace was with me.
Isn't that amazing?
Now, did that help your faith, though? Going through such a traumatic experience, the tornado and all of that, did you start really did that build your faith in believing that, wow, God protected me?
Yeah.
Or did the ones that were with you that passed away, did you blame God in any way for that?
Yeah, that's a great question, man. Man, that's so, I don't know if I've ever been asked that question, but it was part of the process of building my faith, okay? In the moment, it did build my faith in some degree in the moment. I remember going through addiction, basically being near death and ODing and all the things. I never officially OD'd, but passed out, and slept under bridges and, blacked out and all those things. But I always during those 4.5 years, I knew that obviously God was, I remember saying, probably arrogantly, dude, if a tornado couldn't kill me, this isn't gonna kill me. Like, I think I'm gonna be okay. So I had a sense of protection. I really did. But as far as like God's got his hand on you, I couldn't say I felt that or it built that in me. I was just too dark. Everything was so dark, man. It was, you know, just barely keeping your nose above the water at all times, and depressed, couldn't sleep, you know, in and out of drugs and homeless. So I went all the way to losing my vehicle, my license, arrest warrants, felonies hanging over my head, you know, stealing from every place, including my family, homeless, walking, sleeping on wherever I could sleep, homeless shelter. My rock bottom was the homeless shelter. A guy from church said, Jason, you're not ready to live the real world, even though I was I was kind of sober at the time. When I was sober, I was probably still on some kind of a med that was like keeping me. A lot of you might know what Suboxone is, and so you're not really sober. And so he took me to the homeless shelter and said, I don't think you're ready, man. And it was just like the most traumatizing, you know, you're leaving you hanging out there. So Akron, Ohio, October of 2016, when I got dropped off the homeless shelter, that was, you know, that was the bottom, man. I decided no matter what. Now, by this time I'd gotten sober. I'd been through 2 or 3 detox facilities. I'd been through 3 or 4 rehab facilities. I'd done it all. I tried everything. I couldn't stay. I always said the one thing I will never do is long-term rehab. I could not imagine stepping out of my life for 6 months, 8 months, a year, and just quitting my life and going into a controlled facility. See, I still had terrible fear of authority. I hated submitting myself under authority. That's a tough one. It's one I still struggle with, to not near to that degree, but I have to be intentional now about saying this guy knows better than I do, or asking for advice, because I don't like, I have from my childhood where the bishops were always after me. I was always the bad guy, and I was always getting buffeted by people on the outside that didn't like what I was saying or doing. So then whenever I tried to go into rehab, that really was it really played a big role.
Right.
So so it had to get really bad for me to go to rehab. I had to get really bad. But yeah, all the rehabs that I went through were all learning experiences. They were all growing steps, and you know, God used them looking back. But the one thing I always say is, when you take 4.5 years, and I know a lot of people in addiction a lot longer, but you know, the 10 years before the addiction, I was also using drugs. So it was really 14.5 years of partying and addiction. The habits you learn in those 14.5 years, if you want to change your life, you're not going to do that in 30 days.
Right.
You can't change habits that took you years to build with a 2-week course.
Yeah, can't undo all that.
Can't do it. Going to church, or having somebody pray over you, or going through a 12-step program. There is so much more that needs to happen to break those bad habits. So that's why I had to have it. And also the enemy of our souls, the God of this world that hates every one of us and is plotting and planning to destroy us at all times, he knew that if I could break those habits and get 6 months to where I could really break free from all those things, it was over for him. Because once I broke free of that, and I never went back. I want to be honest. I did have about a 3-week relapse about 8 months after I got sober.
Okay.
So I did have that. But other than that, it's free sailing. I don't struggle with drugs. I'll never use drugs. I don't want to use drugs. So I got totally free, but it took a long period. I was 7.5 months in a treatment facility. December, so there's a lot to hear to this story, but to skip through it, October, I went to the homeless shelter. I made a commitment. I'd do whatever it takes. December 21st, I got kicked out of 2 rehabs in that 2-month period or something. I could not, oh man, yeah. And so I got kicked out of a rehab on December 18th or 19th of 2016, and the night that I got kicked out of the rehab, the lady called me from Southern Ohio and said, we just had somebody leave, we have an opening. So literally, the same night I got kicked out, and I am like hopeless, panicking, freaking, calling mom. I got kicked out. They basically threw my bag out the freaking door and said, go. They didn't even allow me back in the house. I was in the yard, walking around the yard, threw out of the rehab when this lady called me, And I had been on the phone with Mom, so we arranged it, and boom, that was it. December 21st, 2016, got into a treatment facility called New Beginnings, Christian-based, some types of government funding that they had used, so they had outside teachers, lots of resources, and amazing place. The lady that started the rehab, her husband was the pastor of a church, so we had to go to their church on Wednesday night, Sunday morning. I went to another church on Thursday night, but she had been through addiction herself, so it was really powerful, very empathetic. But she put the hammer down on you, man. She didn't let you get away with nothing. We had to be up at a certain time. We had to fix our bed. We had to do, and so I made new habits. Stacks of journals. Every single day I journaled, and I sometimes to remind me of how dark it was when I got there. I didn't sleep for 11 days. When I got to rehab, it was 11 days before I got more than about 30 minutes of sleep. I think I had a 20-minute nap on the 8th night, and then I didn't sleep, and then the 10th night, I was going through my journal. The first time I slept 2.5 hours was the 11th or 12th night that I was there.
Wow.
So yeah, it was terrible. I had my addiction was in my bones, man. I went through the worst withdrawals and horrors. But anyway, so we could lead up to that, and then the story, you know, that's where God came in, man.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now the God story comes up.
Now the God story starts. Yeah.
Okay. Well, praise God for giving you the ability, the wisdom to overcome that. And I know you do very good with authority, but obviously you ended up listening and learning from your mistakes and listening to that authority. Then.
I was so desperate, Levi. I was so desperate. Man, few people, not to underestimate anybody else's pain, but few people go through the darkness, man, that I was in, just so unbelievably demonically dark. I experimented slightly. My addiction was to heroin, crack cocaine, cocaine. We did some Xanax, I forget the word for it, but basically whatever I could get a hold of. But I only slightly messed with methamphetamines. I'll tell you this, for anybody watching, methamphetamines are connected to hell. They are demonically connected. They open a portal to the spiritual realm. They break loose a part of your humanity that keeps you human and connects you to God. They dim the light and they open the darkness.
Wow.
And that's why people do insane, crazy. That's the world that you see, the homeless people on addiction, most of them are doing some form of methamphetamine. It is the devil's drug.
Wow.
Do not touch meth. It is demonic. And so when I first did it, I opened the portal. I'm telling you, I had 3 days of full-blown demonic encounters where I literally saw into the demonic realm.
Are you serious?
Dead serious, yeah.
Wow.
Started out, I never share the full story on social media, but an earthquake literally hit my house. And my house literally shook. And I had to drop down on the ground, my whole house shook. And then that opened a portal that really was dark. Because of that is one of the reasons that things were so dark. So everything always had this foreboding, demonic, dark, it's going to get you, the darkness is going to get you, is always there. So when I finally made the choice and got down there, I was so desperate not to go back. And that's what allowed me then, the devil, what he meant for evil, God then used it. And I remembered those dark times and I said, yep, I'm going to submit to this authority. I'm going to do whatever I have to. There was a men's rehab and a women's rehab. And it's probably fair to say 20% of all the men got kicked out because they would mess with the women. They couldn't stay, and they couldn't stay apart. And we had groups together even though it was different buildings. And I made a commitment within the second day I was there, I watched a guy get kicked out because he had been passing notes to one of the girls. And I made a commitment to myself and to God, and I wrote it in my journal. I said, I'll never get thrown out for that reason. I'm not doing it. And even though that was a weakness for me too, wouldn't do it. So, you make these commitments and say, God, this is the line that I drew in the sand. And that's what caused me to be able to stick it out. And I stuck it out, Levi. I did it.
Wow.
I graduated. The felonies got dropped to a misdemeanor, walked into court. The prosecutor came up to me and said, hey, how would you feel if you plead guilty? Would you be okay if we dropped everything to a misdemeanor or an attempt to commit an offense? I said, don't joke with me, bro. That's not funny, okay? Like I had a lot of felonies over my head. And he said, no, I just talked to the judge. And if you finish your program, we'll drop it all to an attempt to commit an offense. And so just like that, before I got in the car to go to the judge, numerous people from the rehab came to the car and prayed over me.
Oh, wow.
I literally remember they got around me and they prayed for favor that day, and God showed up, man.
Wow, that is amazing right there.
I was like, praise God. I had so many moments in the rehab, right? That's really the true story that I should be spending time on sharing, is all the things that happened that last 7 months in the rehab. And it happened because I committed to saying whatever it takes. Yeah. I'm not looking for an easy way out. I'm not going to try and leave early. I'm not going to try to cut corners. I'm not going to try and get away with what I can. No, I'm going to stick it out. And I even said, I will stay here for 2 years if it takes this. Wow. Before I have the money. Then we went into a work program about 4 months in. So I made enough money to get my license back. I made enough money to get an apartment. I made enough money to insure a car that a guy from church gave me. And so I decided to stay there, and I did. And that's the rest is history.
Wow, what a journey you've been through. Wow, yeah. And I know a lot of people can relate. There's so many that have been through drug addiction, different kinds of alcohol addiction, all these different things.
Yeah,
so,
all similar in a lot of ways.
So I appreciate you being open and honest, with that experience, because I know that's going to help a lot of people.
Amen. Amen.
It's a tough road to go down.
Yeah, it really is, man. But I'll tell you this, when I see people struggling now in addiction, I'm like, you're going to be tough, man. You're going to be tough, man. Life ain't going to feel the same after you get through this, because it builds something in you, man. It really does. I'm going through something right now in my personal life, but it doesn't feel heavy and dark like my hard times did back then. Gotcha. I have a little different perspective. I mean, it still can be hard, but it definitely built something in me, and give me a tenacity and a little bit of a make the devil pay kind of attitude. But God showed up for me throughout this time. I have so many stories and testimonies within the rehab and even after. And I always come back. I know it's because of the commitment that I made. I just laid it down. I just I'm done. And then God honored it.
Well, God was looking for obedience. And once you showed that obedience and made that commitment, that is where you got God's blessing.
Obedience is better than sacrifice, because that is the ultimate, what God is looking for.
Yes,
that's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to share?
Well, let's highlight the good parts right now. I'm July 17th of 2017, I graduated from there. I had enough money. I had to get my license, a car, an apartment. People donated all kinds of stuff. Came back to mid-Ohio. I live near in Wayne County, near Wooster, Ohio, between Canton and Wooster. And I came back there and got an apartment, got back into the field. I've always been in windows. My dad owned a window business, so I got right back into contracting. God provided. This guy, a friend of mine, came out of the military, didn't know what he was going to do, had money, but didn't have a skill. I came out of rehab. I had skill, but I didn't have money, and we partnered up, and we both made a lot of money, and everything just started. I started working my butt off, so the last 7 years has been wow. I need to go back and refer back to some journals sometimes, just remember where I was at when I came out. But I was in a really good place. But since then, just putting that yes in your heart, Isaiah 6:8, it's on the side of my work trailer. It says, "Here I am, Lord, send me." Always saying, where am I supposed to go? Why am I here? It's very important, because the reason, I think, number one, if I were to simplify how I stay sober, because a lot of people can't stay sober. Right. I always say everybody can get sober, but you can't stay sober. And I believe it's because you don't have purpose. You don't have a real purpose in your life. So to have purpose and a reason why you're here, and that's what my hope is for this testimony, is that you can see if you're going through hard times, your purpose doesn't go away. The reason you're here doesn't go away. How much other people love you doesn't go away. And you're needed in people's lives, in the world. God needs you. And so when I found purpose, so now I'm a business owner. I own a company called Clearview Windows. We do windows and doors. I am an elected central committeeman. I got involved in the political arena in 2020. And so I'm on our central committee, which is the very lowest form of government. I just wanted to do something positive, make a difference in my town. I go to my city council meetings. I go to fire department meetings. I've been on the fire department board. I go to school board meetings, right? We have helped people get elected in school board races. Just things here that make an impact in people's lives out here that maybe you don't think. that it would. And so that brings purpose to my life. And so that's kind of the message of my story is that I have been able to find purpose in my life. And I'm not always looking to get high or to have fun or, or have to run. I'm still single, so it is easy to think you have to run over here, run over there, go have fun or party or do this or what am I doing? It's Friday night. But now my life is full of things that matter, my business and my family and my friends. And then we have a deliverance team called SWAT, Spiritual Warfare and Deliverance Team, that we are doing deliverance because I also think that what I was going through, I wasn't aware a lot of what I was going through was demonic oppression. I invited a lot of spirits and a lot of open doors in my life when I was doing drugs, especially the meth. It opened up all these doors and let the hordes of hell in. And I could, you're trying to pray yourself through. And I always say people try to bless you in your bondage. People want to bless you and pray for you, but you're in bondage by outside forces that have you trapped, and you can't see it because your spirit is weak and your flesh is powerful. So when our flesh becomes weak and we connect to God and have that one-on-one relationship and get to know Him, then our flesh becomes weaker and our spirit becomes bigger. Now you're aware of the spirit realm, and now you can engage in what's happening in the spirit realm, and then you recognize what's needed and make the impact. And I saw in the spiritual realm over my city how the spiritual realm affected the political realm. And that's one of the things that inspires and drives me to be involved. The spiritual realm and strongholds and different principalities influence. They influence schools, they influence city council, they most certainly influence government, governors, federal, state, all these are very influenced. So we, as the light of the world, can be here, and we can come. We don't have to stand on a street corner with a Bible shouting. We just have to be there and walk out what God's calling us to and be a light and be positive and be proud or open to say that this is evil or that I believe in God or let's pray. Let's pray. Right in the city council meeting, we are openly talk about it. And so people know where I stand. It brings light. It brings hope, encouragement. And that's what keeps me sober. That's what keeps me
your
coming
purpose.
back. That's my purpose.
You found that purpose.
I found purpose.
Man, that was powerful.
Yeah.
And I love how you brought that out, as finding your purpose. Because you had a lot more going on now, rather than thinking about that meth or thinking about that drug. Yeah, I love it. Man.
Yeah. Because you're going to look for something. You're going to fill yourself with something.
Yeah.
You're going to find something to fill yourself with. Most people fill it with money, and if you're not into drugs, maybe you're into, sex or whatever else it is. It's all just a way to fill. And then I always say, personally, you're like a computer. You've only got so much memory. So you've got 212 gigabytes and you're filling it full of money, work, and bad stuff. Where's the good stuff going to fit? You don't have endless amount of space and ability to take in.
So you'd say it comes down to what we're going to feed ourselves. What are you going to occupy yourself with? What are you going to surround yourself with? What you did is you found a purpose and you're involved in other things now, and that takes your mind more off of what your addictions were.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, absolutely. That's true, though. It's what we take in.
Right.
We ingest. Everything we ingest affects us. This coffee that I'm drinking, it affects me. And you don't think this affects you? Think about if you're watching. I'm a huge advocate against porn. I think porn is the pit of hell. It rots your brain. It's so bad for you. Even leave the spiritual aspect out, which that's a whole other ballgame. It could probably open portals. But the bottom line is it's really, really bad for you. And you cannot ingest things like heavily drinking alcohol or heavily watching porn or anything like that, and it's not going to affect you. You are going to be affected and rotted at a spiritual, even physical level, because your body is connected. We're body, soul, and spirit, so they're all connected. You cannot think your spirit is healthy because you go to church on Sunday when you're getting wasted on Saturday night. Okay, it's not about, does God say you shouldn't drink alcohol? Is alcohol a sin? That can be a whole different conversation. This is about, we are all connected, and you can't expect to take something in and not have it affect you negatively. So I am trying to be very careful about what I watch. Music, huge. You could do a whole podcast on music, man. Music is the tool. Obviously music is beautiful. We love music. All love music, but music is one of the biggest tools of the enemy, man. The tones and the frequencies and the words, it influences you. You think you can listen to that stuff and it not affect you, you're wrong. I'm not here to say what it's going to do to you, but it's going to affect you, man.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to be careful what we take in, and that's why people in drugs. All they take in is rotting out drugs that are bad for their body, but they're also the spiritual realm is just like every door is open and they're just getting hammered, man.
Yeah. One thing I've realized is always everything I was addicted to, which was crack cocaine for a short period of time, and then alcohol was my big one.
Oh yeah.
And it always, if it's something that is destroying you, you never have enough.
Yeah.
You always want it more.
Yeah.
But I've noticed when I got saved and I had the peace of Christ that surpasses all our knowledge in the flesh, that it was fulfilling. It was satisfying. It was enough.
Yeah.
But everything else was destroying me, and I always wanted more. You just mentioned porn. I used to be addicted to it. I wanted more. They didn't make enough online for me to watch. I wanted more.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's a saying in addiction. It says, "One's never enough, and 1,000 is too many."
Yes.
And it's this idea that you cannot get enough. You think, if I just get drunk once and just get this one more time. No. It doesn't work like that, because your body, soul, and spirit. And if you're filling yourself up with evil and dark things, you're gonna, it's an empty hole.
Yeah.
It's a pit.
Yeah.
The only thing that can fill that hole is connecting to your Creator, to Spirit, the light that was within you that you were called to walk out. I mean, God knew you from the time before you were formed in your mother's womb, man. And
Amen.
He's got a plan, man. He knows the beginning from the end.
Yes.
So.
Wow.
Yeah.
I could listen to you all day.
I've got a lot of good stories. Sometimes it's hard to share because there's so much to my story within rehab. But this is how God always did just enough to me. He gave me enough stories, enough hope to get me through. And so I'm very grateful. And even to this day, right? Even when times are hard, I look back over the wins of my life and over the positive things. And you know, you can get tough. Right now, I'm fairly new in business, and I really struggle with not being where I want to be with in the business. But I'm only a year in, you know, and I try to remind myself, like, man, we can't accomplish it all. We want it all, and we want it now, my personality. So we have to really measure ourselves. Be like, no, I'm doing great, man. I just felt this like earlier this week, like God was saying, man, you're really doing good. I'm really proud of you. Like, you know, it's not an arrogant thing. It's just like looking at where I came from, and I know, and sometimes that's hard, man. I struggle. I'm like, man, I'm not. This is so hard, and it's, you know, we're just like our sob story. But no, man, celebrate any recovery, celebrate any kind of progress, man. Make your progress big, blow it up, put it on your wall. Take your failures, bury them in the backyard. Okay, learn from them, move on. Don't think they don't affect you, but then, you know, elevate your successes and bury your failures.
Yeah. Wow. Beautifully said.
Yeah, thank you, man.
And you've been through it, man.
Yeah.
and you've been a blessing. It's such a blessing just to hear you say that, because I went through a lot of that myself. Man, it can be a stronghold. I tell you. So what are you doing now? You belong to a ministry at all, or?
Yeah. Well, my number one, you know, goal thing right now in life, I think most of my energy is the local government that I'm involved in. It really has my heart. That's where God's pulling me. But business owner, and then I'm really passionate about the spiritual warfare and deliverance team. Our ministry, we have a Facebook page. It's called SWAT, SWADT, SWAT Ministry. You can go follow us on Facebook. And we believe that in the end times that we're in, last days, however you want to say it, right? There's definitely crazy things happening. So spiritual warfare is very heightened, right?
Yes.
It's almost like the veil between heaven and earth is getting thin, and there's just there's such a heightened level of this demonic realm. So I'm very passionate about helping people get free of that.
Wow.
You know,
We don't have enough deliverance ministry stuff going on, and I'm just so blessed to hear that.
I don't think so. I think people have underestimated. People think it's not a big deal in the Christian world, and there's all these controversies around it, but man, it's a big deal. And when you see somebody that it changed their life because they got free from a generational curse or something, or they thought it was them. See, here's the thing the devil does. He always makes you think it's you, it's my problem, it's me, but it's not always you. Yeah. Sometimes it's an exterior. If you believe in the spirit realm, you have to believe they can buffet you, whether you're possessed by them or they can addiction runs in people's families. That's a generational curse.
Yeah, it's got to be dealt with.
Got to be dealt with. You can manhandle your way out of that. You can, behavior modification and discipline your way out of it and quit using. But if you even break it, if you don't break it spiritually, you're going to pass it on to your generation. Yeah. And God forbid that any of my kids would ever deal with addiction. I deal with it. I'll go through, homelessness and rehab for 7 months and almost die dead, whatever it takes. We're going to break that cycle, and you have to have that, that's where you have to see it. But see, if you don't see or understand the spiritual realm, you can't take this view on it,
right,
and to deal with it. And so that's why I'm really passionate about the deliverance thing, man. So
all it takes is one person to stand up in that family.
In that
and
family,
break it
yep.
off.
Start the ball rolling, man. Yep. Bring it out. Talk about it. That's the other thing, with my story and what I hope sharing my story does. But deliverance is the same thing. Everything that's in the darkness can stay there because it's dark. Nobody sees it. It doesn't have to be dealt with. Your bad habits are probably not on your front page of Facebook. You're probably not putting them anywhere on Facebook. Probably nobody knows about your bad habits. Maybe 1 or 2 people. So it's in the dark. It's hidden.
Right.
How are you going to break that habit if you don't bring it out and talk about it? Bring it out in the light. Tell people what's happening. Have people pray for you. Sit down with the deliverance team. Is this spiritual? Is this demonic? Is this generational? Where is this just me? Sometimes it is just us. We do have bad habits.
Right.
Not everything's a demon, okay?
Right.
But that's why we want to be interactive
Yeah.
and educate each other and get around people who have knowledge on it.
There's a You Matter organization that I support, and their motto is, "It's not weak to speak."
Wow. Put that on a t-shirt.
Yeah, put that on
Yeah,
They
I
have it
like
on a
that.
t-shirt.
Okay, really?
It's not weak to speak.
I like that.
Yeah.
See-
Speak out. Talk about it.
Just one last thing here. I remember sharing my testimony one time in front of a crowd. One of the first times I did it, and I felt so vulnerable. Especially there's parts of my story that I haven't shared here that are very vulnerable. I was a piece of garbage, right? Just did terrible things. When you share that in front of people, and I say I did this, and I'm like cowering inside, and I'm like, covered in shame. I'm like, I cannot believe they know that. They know that about me. And somebody came up to me and they said, "Man, you've got a lot of courage. So much courage." And I was like, "What?" And the God just said, here's what he said to me. He said, "Courage looks different when you're looking at it."
Oh.
Courage looks different when you're looking at it. It's not, we
good.
think courage is one thing, being strong, holding the sword,
Right.
shouting freedom like Patriot, Braveheart, Mel Gibson, we're bold and courageous. But sometimes courage doesn't look like that.
Yeah,
It looks different when you're telling me your story, something you did, because people relate and connect. And that's the interconnection, workings of relationships that most of us don't know. Most of us haven't been taught. We haven't been encouraged to share. So
All right.
share your stories, share your testimonies.
Share it with somebody else.
That's right. And
Thank you, Jason.
my social media feeds, guys, if anyone wants to follow me, my Instagram is Twisted Miller for Tornado, right? Twisted Miller. YouTube is Jason D. Miller. My Facebook is also just Jason D. Miller. And you guys can follow me there if you want. So.
All right. Give them a follow, man. Thank you very much, Jason.
You got it, Eli. Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
You bet.
And thank you guys for watching.